At California Psychics, we know that sometimes you can wake up thinking,
Ugh, I don't know if I'm in the right career. Ew. Or the right relationship.
but whatever your life dilemma, at California Psychics, we'll give you the guidance you need to feel certain about your life choices. And because we only connect you with the very best, we guarantee if your reading isn't life-changing, it's free. California Psychics. Visit CaliforniaPsychics.com today for limited time offers.
You know what it is. That's right. It's time to talk money with your money nerd and financial coach. Now, tighten those purse strings and open those ears. It's the Money Talk with Tiff podcast.
Hey everyone, I am so excited because I have LaVaisha Davis on the line, and LaVaisha's here to talk to us about the family CEO mindset. And I wanted to talk about it because we've never talked about that on the podcast before. So hey LaVaisha, how are you?
I am doing good today, Tiffany. How are you?
I'm doing great. So let's just hop right in for the audience. What exactly, because I'm sure we know what a CEO is, like the owner of a company, the chief executive officer, but what does a family CEO, what is that?
You know, that's a great way to just start right off the bat. And I know most people are familiar with the executive term of CEO, but I would still like to break it down, just a little because, the role of a CEO in an organization or a company is to, do the visionary part of the planning. They provide the vision, the leadership, the strategy that is to drive growth and efficiency and sustainability in a company, right? And what a family CEO is just applying that same concept, but to our family. It's the person who steps up to lead and not just financially, who's trying to out earn, their predecessors, like their previous generations, but really trying to define and execute the family's vision for wealth and longevity, whatever that means. Because a lot of people think wealth just means money. But that's only a part of the picture. So the family CEO's job, one of them is to figure out what wealth actually means for their family, because it's not a one size fits all. And then they have to identify the gaps that's keeping their wealth from becoming a reality. And those gaps exist on so many different levels that the family CEO is making a decision to dive into those gaps and how they can strategically close them again. So whatever we think wealth is, it can become a reality.
I love that. I love that. So the CEO's job is to start thinking strategically about the family's wealth.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Gotcha. So, okay, if someone's listening right now, they're like, this sounds like me. What are some things that you can, what tips can you give them, or to identify if they're the CEO of their family?
Ooh, well, see, the thing about the family CEO role, it's kind of near and dear to my heart from my own personal experience, which I hope we get the chance to get to. But there are really three main ways to identify if you're the family CEO. So the first one, which is my personal favorite when I say this again from personal experience, is if you are pursuing the education. If you are trying to obtain insight or certain certifications or financial licenses, and you maybe as a business opportunity or even just to better yourself individually, if you are on that path, you are more than likely going to be able to gain certain tools that give you access to solve some of the deep-rooted issues that create those wealth gaps that I had mentioned previously. So if you are already doing that, that's one way. The second way, if you know that most parents or something like this may lack their ability to be the family CEO, so they're intentionally cultivating or creating that within their family, like encouraging a child or a sibling or someone else to do what I just described before, pursue those things, pursue that education, those licenses in order to better us as a family. Or if you have just taken, the last way would be if you have just kind of decided to take a road where I've just focused on increasing my own earning capability. I've been able to increase my income. I'm probably the first generation 6-figure earner, first business owner, first executive, whatever it may be. And you know that long-term wealth is important to you. So now you're seeking advice or professional services to implement what's needed to actually create and cultivate wealth. If you are doing either one of those three things, you most likely are the family CEO.
Gotcha. And that makes complete sense. Now, you mentioned something about your story and how you got into, because I'm so curious to know, how did you come up with this concept or figure out this concept? How did this relate to your story?
Oh, yeah. So for me, this started the hard way, unfortunately through loss. My brother passed away as a victim of violence. And as a family at the time that it happened, we realized we didn't have the resources, to bury him. We didn't have them individually. We didn't have them collectively. And that was just like a light bulb moment for me, as it forced me to take a hard look at where my family stood financially. And the truth was, we weren't standing at all. We were scrambling, and not only did my brother not have life insurance, but after further reviewing, like no one of my family members had adequate life insurance. No one had any real savings. No one had any real retirement plans. I mean, nothing. And the reality that we were experiencing wasn't unique or uncommon to us. For example, when we get into some facts, like nearly 40% of Americans can't cover a $400 emergency without going into debt. Or the median Black household has about 1/8 of the wealth compared to the median white household. Only about 18% of Black households have investment or retirement accounts compared to 51% of white households. And I just saw those numbers playing out in real time in my own family and the time of tragedy. So I just kind of made a decision at that moment, like, we're not just going to accept this, because my husband and I were already entrepreneurs at the time that my brother passed away. So we felt like, we had a little bit of an upper hand, but clearly not enough, because we still couldn't provide my mother the resources that she needed to be able to afford to grieve. She had to go right back to work after losing her only son. So when I say CEO, I think I did what most CEOs of any organization or company would do. I just, I saw a problem. I studied that problem. I found the solutions. I too myself got the financial education, the licenses, and started applying those principles, and not just to my own life, but even for my family and the clients that we serve, to this day, that's in the exact same boat. So tragedy triggered change for me, and it redirected my entire career choice from what I was studying as a biology major, going into entrepreneurship, into full-blown wealth manager and partner at a wealth management firm.
Yes. And isn't it amazing how that happens? How just one tragedy can change your entire trajectory. And I experienced, I know when my grandma passed away, kind of the same realization. Now, she did have life insurance that she was paying on for years and things like that. But after she passed away, we were like, that's all that's there? Like, that's it. Mm-hmm. So she was adequately undercovered, especially with how much funerals are nowadays. I was definitely surprised, because I feel like I'm the family CEO of my family. And so they wanted me in on all the conversations, for the burial and things like that. And when I was, in those meetings, I'm like, wow. I told them right then and there, and I said, I know this might be a bad time for me to say this. However, I said, I just want to be cremated. Please do not go through all of this with me, for real, because it is grossly expensive. And so anyway, back to our point though, I was just like, I see how this family CEO thing can come about, and especially in times of tragedy or in times of struggle or need. And I always say necessity breeds innovation. And so we have to start coming up with ways. And there's usually always that one person that's like, okay, I think I can figure this out.
Exactly. That's exactly what I tell people too. Every family has a defining moment, like you just described, whether it is a death or if it's just a medical emergency, or if it's something, as simple as an opportunity that we missed out on. So we all need to ask ourselves that question of who's going to step up and say enough is enough, and just take certain action to make sure that our family doesn't stay in this situation. And that can be one of those three things, like what I described before. If you're going to decide to take that role seriously and pursue the education and things like that yourself, if you're going to outsource it, or if you're going to create it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So now that we've talked about the family CEO, if somebody's listening right now, just like I did, I said, oh, that's me, right? So I know it's me. What are some things that maybe we haven't thought about? Because, sometimes companies, they get, sometimes companies, they'll get consultants to come in and say, oh, these are some of your blind spots. So, what are
Mhm.
some popular blind spots when it comes to a family CEO that you've encountered?
No, yeah, that's a great question. Some very common blind spots. Number one is estate planning, as we both experienced. If we don't have proper estate planning, everything we're working hard to do in our lifetime most likely will disappear within the next generation. It's about over a 70% chance that that's going to happen. So, in order for our hard work to transfer smoothly, we have to have estate planning. And as critical as it is, it's often overlooked. That's the first one. The second blind spot is how to actually grow money. Investments range. There are levels and classes of investments. And if you want to experience a different level or a different class of investments that's actually going to help you grow in significant value, there are a lot of requirements that need to be met. Like you have to be a qualified purchaser or accredited investor to get this access. And if we don't reach that, then we're limited to the everyday or the traditional investment style, which impedes on whether we can create wealth or not. And then the last one, ultimately, is no leadership. That's why the CEO is so important, because if we don't have someone driving this vehicle, the world is going to drive it for you and drive it right into a brick wall again with nothing, where you end up with zero, where you worked hard. The first generation can work very, very hard to create it. The second generation might enjoy it and have a good time, while the third generation has absolutely nothing and have to start over. And it creates this rags to riches to rags scenario. So those are the three major blind spots: estate planning, additional investment options or advanced investment options, and leadership and guidance that's going to oversee and overlook this wealth as it moves through different conditions, economic conditions, political conditions. How do we still keep it intact?
Yes, yes, I love that. And it is so true. This concept, I never thought about it in this way. So I'm glad that you have brought that up and, that we're able to just dive into this topic. Now, if people were listening and they were like, you know what, LaVaisha, that sounds like me. I see a couple blind spots that we have, but I need somebody else to kind of help us along. What are some ways that they can get in contact with you or follow you on social media?
Yeah, so I tried to keep it simple, so you don't have to type in anything crazy. Everything is under my name. Everything is under LaVaisha Davis. And even if you wanted to take it a step further, we have a community that helps cultivate family CEOs. When you're starting from scratch and really trying to build that skill set out. So if you are interested in being a part of that community, you would just go to mywealthandlegacy.com. First, you're going to get a free ebook to kind of wrap your mind around the family CEO concept. I know we've covered a snippet today, and that's pretty much all it is a slither. And that ebook is to help kind of dive a little bit deeper. And then you have the opportunity to join our community where you can learn more. And if you are already a thriving wealth creator, like again, you've already created significant wealth or value for yourself, and you want to go even deeper of implementing or outsourcing that CEO role, or I more like to call it a co-CEO role, where you can kind of bring in all the necessary professionals. There's also an opportunity for you to schedule a time with us on that same site for us to kind of dive a little bit deeper and see if we could be a possible solution for you.
Perfect, perfect. And I'm so glad that you have that resource, because sometimes just in talking to other people that kind of do this type of work as well, they end up being that family CEO and it feels like you're on an island at times. So I'm glad that you have a resource where people can come together and then kind of cultivate that experience so you don't feel so alone. So thank you so much. And I'll make sure that I have all of those links in the show notes for our audience. So if you were doing something else while you were listening, don't worry. Just check out the show notes. They'll be there. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. This was very informative and eye-opening for us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope every listener trust me, you're listening for a reason. Understand that if your purpose is CEO, you take that purpose very seriously and take action.
For sure, for sure. Thank you so much and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you for listening, joining, and being a part of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast this week. You can check Tiff out every Thursday for a new Money Talk podcast. But if you just can't wait until next week, you can listen to previous podcast episodes at moneytalkwitht.com or follow Tiff on all social media platforms at Money Talk with T. Until next time, spend wise by spending less than you make. A word to the money wise is always sufficient.